there are a lot of large language models that are specialized for particular areas. And I think that gives businesses an opportunity to develop their own large language model. I just heard about Zoho just announced that they have their own LLM, on their own server and in their own environment, which I think that part is the promise that I think people are looking for. But you're right. I think that the next challenge, though, is that, we don't really have at least in the US, we don't really have this data policy enacted that's nationwide. And I think that leads into some things in terms of AI, in terms of permission for training. That's why we see so many legal issues about content right now with AI, in terms of, what do you have permission to train your data upon? Do you have a process for that? We're going to see quite a bit of that as a debate as we move forward, as teams decide to do their own development. And I think we'll see that both go hand in hand as we move forward.
Welcome to the Information Week podcast. I'm Pierre Ruth, the senior editor. And in this episode, we are taking a look at planning the next transformation in this time and era of AI. We're in a time where many organizations are looking at a plethora of tools and resources that are becoming available, potentially being leveraged for AI. But we're also in a time where many organizations have been through different types of transformations in the past. So we're taking a look at how this is a bit different in terms of the scope and breadth of things that organizations are considering, whether it's from the operations side of like what makes more sense for the certain aspects of the organization, and then also the technical side of what makes more sense for organizations to try and leverage when it comes to this kind of transformation versus digital transformation with cloud transformation in the past. So for this episode, we are joined by Pierre DeBois, founder and CEO of Zimana, and we are also joined by Saket Srivastava, CIO of Asana. Saket, nice to be seeing you, and welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
So quickly tell us a bit about yourself. Pierre is a kind of an old friend for the show, but Saket, if you could please just do a quick introduction for yourself as well.
Well, I'm the CIO, as you mentioned, I'm the CIO at Asana. Asana, for folks who perhaps haven't heard of, is a collaborative work management platform, a platform where we feel that companies coordinate work through humans and AI, and we connect company-level goals to execution and strive for clarity and accountability through work. So I've been here 3+ years and looking forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. Again, very much thank you so much for being here. All right. And Pierre, I don't want to, giving you short shrift, you want to, just share a little bit with the audience as well, a bit about yourself and Zimana?
Happy to do so. Again, my name is Pierre DeBois. I'm the founder of Zimana Analytics. And what we do is we provide analytics services for businesses that need help with their marketing data. Been in business for 16 years and have worked with clients from Google Analytics all the way to R and Python to help create data models. It's been a lot of fun, and that's partly that fun is why I'm hoping I'm getting to share with you a little bit today as well.
Awesome. Great. Again, both of you, thank you so much for making the time today. All right, so this is a question for both of you, and just give your perspective from within your own organizations and the considerations that you have when it comes to this. With this continuing rise of AI, all of the various tools that are out there, and when you're looking at things for within your own organization, for within your own use, what are you looking at to help your organization, either furthering your transformation or to be that next layer of transformation that you're considering?
Maybe I can start, and Pierre, please jump in. Clearly, we've been using this word transformation for many years now. You talked about digital transformation, cloud transformation. In my world, we had almost started to take this word transformation too lightly. But with this AI, it certainly does feel very generational, once in a generation kind of transformation. So this does feel like transformation. Now, in terms of how we're thinking about this is, yes, there's a huge technology aspect to it. But why this is even more massive is because one can't just think about this as a technology transformation or an effort. This is really how this is more like a workforce transformation. This is how work will evolve and change through this transformation. So how do you make sure that you're bringing the people along on that journey? How do you make sure that people are taking advantage of this and feeling ready to be part of this journey? In terms of as a technologist, what I'm also thinking about is not too far in the future. In fact, in early days, already even now, we're talking about a workforce of not just humans. We're talking about workforce of humans and AI. And as a CIO, I need to start thinking about identity, security, governance. All of those aspects are going to be super, super important as we start bringing more value to our organizations through the AI lens as well. I'll pause there, Pierre. Love to get your perspective as well.
I think from my end, a lot of the challenges with workflow with data. For years, businesses, whether you're a small or a large corporation, has been told you need to gather data because you can't make these insights without the data. That mantra is kind of stuck with us, I think, collectively for so many years now, that now we need to think about workflow. And so one of the challenges is that how do we pick data that is trying to how do we pick data that is really related to our strategy, related to how we are working with how we work with that data. How do we actually get to a final analysis or insight? And I think that's where the AI and a lot of the processes around AI becomes an impact. So that's the thing that we tend to look at is, what's repeating a lot within that workflow, because that's usually where AI is applied when it comes to data analysis.
Gotcha. Okay, I appreciate both your thoughts on that. How does this time period, and you've kind of touched on this a bit already, but how does this differ from some of the prior kinds of eras of, those talking about cloud transformation or other types of digital transformation that we've discussed in terms of approach? There are certain things that went on with the onset of cloud transformation, when organizations were kind of going back and forth, or like, what should we, why, or where not, why, but these days with AI, there seems to be that kind of very widespread, let's move forward, or at least there seems to be kind of the broader mindset of, okay, we've all got to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, right, the cloud transformation was huge. It was really all about how technology is going to be delivered. This feels bigger. This feels more like generational, redefining how work will get done. The way to kind of think about this is, how do we pilot, how do we experiment, and how do we quickly start identifying ways to land meaningful impact for our organizations? And then so there's this incrementality to this, while this is also transformative. That's how I'm thinking about it. Cloud was maybe more from an infrastructure, how we were delivering technology for our workforce and for our customers. This can touch so many more surfaces than just what cloud transformation was really about.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think the transformation that's happening, particularly with analytics and with data, which the CIO is going to run into time and time again, is, what is being connected to my AI model? Right now, we're seeing a lot of excitement about MCPs, the model context protocols. And the first thing that we probably are thinking about collectively is that now that we can connect devices or software solutions to our AI model of preference, how does that change? How do we plan our prompts? What is it that we should be looking for to ask? What sort of data that we want to have accessed? I think these sort of things are transformational in terms of how we operate. And it's the things that we are collectively are paying attention to, whether it's you're a large organization with suppliers or even a small business with partners. I think it's something that we have to keep looking at and we have to be excited about because it's so transformational.
Okay. All right, and then we'll ask one more question for each of you. if you could pick one essential opportunity and also one essential core concern that you have, as we're proceeding forward, trying to make use of AI, finding essentially the right coherent way to really make it make sense for you and your organizations.
If I go in first, I think Pierre, what you were talking about from a data standpoint, there is no AI strategy if there's no data strategy. And yet you cannot wait to solve the data strategy and problem incompleteness to get started on that AI roadmap and strategy. So how do you sort of find that balance? I think that's an important thing for leaders to consider and factor in as they're sort of navigating this. The other piece is that there's just so much hype and noise around this, right? That you can get distracted. There are every vendor is going to talk about how they become an AI company, right? How do you parse through that noise? How do you make sure that you're not stuck in just trying and piloting and experimenting things, but maybe have a vision, have a North Star. This is where we're headed, and this is how we're going to get to that. Otherwise, you might end up becoming caught up in this constant, never-ending experimentation loop. Find opportunities where you can land meaningful impact that becomes compelling and inspiring for your workforce to get on this journey.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up about with the data. That is definitely I think a challenge. I think the positive part right now is that there are a lot of large language models that are specialized for particular areas, and I think that gives businesses an opportunity to develop their own large language model. I just heard about Zoho just announced that they have their own LLM, on their own server and in their own environment, which I think that part is the promise that I think people are looking for. But you're right. I think that the next challenge, though, is that we don't really have at least in the U.S., we don't really have this data policy enacted that's nationwide. And I think that leads into some things in terms of AI, in terms of permission for training. That's why we see so many legal issues about content right now with AI, in terms of, what do you have permission to train your data upon? Do you have a process for that? We're going to see quite a bit of that as a debate as we move forward, as teams decide to do their own development. And I think we'll see that both go hand in hand as we move forward.
And great. Thank you both for your insights on that. And as you can see, the Shadowrun Game Master screen has emerged. So now we are going to get into the table exercise portion of the conversation. As the two of you are being asked to essentially fulfill your current roles, Pierre as CEO and Saket as the CIO for Questionable Ideas Are Us, a fictional company that is going to be trying to navigate its way in this AI era. And this time, we're going to have we might not get through all the scenarios, but we'll get through a couple of them. Okay. So again, your actions here, will not be held against you beyond this session, since Questionable Ideas Are Us is a fictional company that has already put itself in weird places in other sessions. So let's see how we do trying to help them navigate through some of the well-meaning or well-intended ideas, but potentially confusing. Okay. All right. So here's our first scenario. All right. The board of directors for Questionable Ideas Are Us wants AI to power everything, including janitorial services around the offices. The same board of directors held back on prior transformation plans, including cloud migration, going cloud native, and you can see there's a sense of panic this time around. That they don't want to miss out on this transformation era. How would you frame the discussion on what is feasible from a technical perspective and what would be functional business uses of AI to this board?
Well, I'll say that there's nothing really questionable about what this board of directors are raising. I'm sure this is a conversation in a lot of companies. But I do take my role as a technology leader in the company to not just be experimenting and implementing, but also educating and guiding and advising, right? So clearly, in this case, the opportunity is uh, framing this conversation more from a strategic lens and not just, like, as I mentioned earlier, from a technology only, but how do you take the workforce along in this? Help them identify that we can't just go all cylinders firing onto all things possible, but identify some opportunities. There are clearly areas where AI is showing a lot more impact in some areas than others. These could be customer support. This could be marketing, content generation. These could be, in my world of IT support and all of those stuff, right? Let's start with those, learn from those, and then try to go broader and approach other opportunities as opposed to just trying out and spreading ourselves too thin. I'll pause there.
I would also agree with that. I think the challenge here is the team has dealt with some transformation initiatives prior to this that may actually end up being a challenge if they're trying to implement AI within the organization. And as much as I respect janitorial services, I still feel like there's probably more of a challenge. You really want to try to get those early wins. That's something that for data and analytics was a big deal back in the day, and still is. You want to try to, if you're implementing something new, you want to try it on something that has some sort of significance to the company, and then resonate that down to other areas which are important but may not be strategic long term. I think that's how you get the win and get the transformation to stick, which is the most important piece.
Gotcha. Okay, great. You've steered them away from deciding that everything is going to be solved by putting, hyper-powered AI in Roombas to clean the offices and everything else around there. Okay. Next scenario.
One Roomba's okay. That's
okay. All right. Next scenario. All right. The board of directors is very eager to buy the premium enterprise tier of Not So Easy GP Cheese, the latest AI powerhouse for the last 5 minutes on the market. While it is seemingly a more powerful model, it's still an incremental step up. Adopting it would be an easy way to show from an external perspective that your company is looking cutting edge. However, your internal teams have already been working on small language models, other resources that show promise at lower cost, but they need more time for development. Now, the cost of adopting the not so easy GP cheese that the board of directors is so interested in would require shuttering that internal AI development effort and possibly other cost-cutting moves. How do you assess what makes the most sense for the company to adopt and then communicate it to the stakeholders?
Yeah. Again, in my world, I'll connect this to the data piece, which is so important, right? It's okay to experiment, even this cool new toy that the board of directors are talking about it. But start thinking of things from this lens of return on investment, impact, and you need to measure that, right? And again, as a technology leader, as a CIO, my job is to show them maybe a comparison. Hey, that this is what you're suggesting. This is through some of the trials and experimentation that we've done. This is where we feel it's falling short, or this is where it's got potential. And this is where what we're doing internally with our small language model, and this is the wins that we're seeing with it. And then it's an objective conversation around what makes sense to go pursue.
Yeah, I think the idea is when you experiment, you need to think about the environment primarily. It's hard. Sometimes we tend to forget this with anything with software and with tech because it's not physical. I remember my days at Ford Motor Company where I remember we used to do advanced engineering separate of being with a program where a team had a responsibility for a new vehicle. The reason why it was separate is that the advanced engineering team can focus on getting the details right, the functionality right, before handing it off to the program. And I think we have the same type of challenge when we talk about AI software. I mentioned about MCP. That should trigger some conversations of what do we want to develop with versus what is being done for a product or service. Having that sort of markation, I think, is going to be very, very vital moving forward. So I would go with that.
All right. Okay. Good job on that one. All right, for the last scenario, and the first scenario, Pierre, you'll see that something you were saying about the delay that the company had with getting on board with transformation. That's what we call foreshadowing for this one. Okay. Given how slow the company was to get on the cloud and other transformation tracks, there are parts of IT that are just not a smooth fit for AI to power now. There's even a dark section of IT where COBOL is entrenched in transaction, and the team implores you in hushed whispers to not even look at the code too hard out of fear it will either break or it'll turn you all to stone. And no one on staff knows how they would fix this if something were to go wrong. Now, the agentic AI that you've been using in parts of the company is already suggesting to you that you just burn down that part of the business and don't look back. How do you assess parts of the business to make the AI transition, especially much older legacy IT elements? Does it make sense to cut those segments and start over from scratch with AI resources, even if it means some hiccups and potential loss of data and transactions along the way? Or do you back away slowly and hope that future generations with full-fledged artificial general intelligence will have the answer and it's not your problem?
My approach would be you can't just burn down and shut it off and then realize what the heck has just happened. But you've got to be thoughtful and intentional about solving for tech debt that you've accumulated over time. And it's not easy because there are business priorities that always take priority over solving for this legacy and tech debt that we have. But if you're able to build in some rhythm and hygiene wherein you're finding some sprints to go solve for tech debt as well and have the business understand that this is important for us to stay competitive and current, then you keep chipping at it. And then hopefully soon you'll not be left with this legacy COBOL, Foxborough kind of system that you're having to navigate with.
I would say I will also add, I think collectively we're starting to realize we have to be smarter about technical debt because of the fact that now with so many things being networked, it's not just discontinue this one thing and other systems are not affected. We have to think in terms of how those things are being affected. And it's not, I agree, it's not easy to identify, particularly with products and services, because we do predictions on demand, but it's based on certain assumptions thrown in. I mean, think about, what's going on with the tariffs and how many companies now are scrambling to figure out how to be, to appear, to get their message off that they either produce in America or try to scramble to get their products produced in America. You see that in the automotive industry. Technical debt doesn't just come from the technology itself anymore. It's more about, the environment. And I think what you want is to have not only, if you're choosing to make a switch over, you need to ask yourself, what are the core competencies that are impacted, and again, just try and figure out, how those things could possibly work with the new technology versus the old. I think that core needs to be something you have to protect for. And the CIOs are, to use a Star Wars reference, they are the Jedi Knights for protecting that these days, because so many things are dealing with networks and with systems. And the CIOs are usually where the buck stops.
Looks like the CIOs and CEO in this case have worked together to hold questionable ideas R us back from lapsing into the dark side of things. But listen, that does it for this episode. Questionable Ideas R us survives for yet another episode. Saket, Pierre, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate your time, your expertise, and your knowledge.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation.